in honor of Taylor Swift's most recent album. I found this and thought that it was very fitting. So this is the Adoptee Poets Department. And I'm really excited to get to tell you about the poetry collection, Mirrors Made of Ink. Here, let me minimize this. There we go. So this is the agenda. This is what we're going to talk about today. It's really mostly here for me so that I don't get off topic. But just to give you a heads up, what we're going to be doing, I'll talk about how poetry has affected my life, the composition of this book, Mirrors Made of Ink, and I'll read some poetry to you, and then we'll do some fun stuff. Okay, so I was thinking about this the other day, and I actually wrote a blog a little bit ago called I'm a Writer and So Are You. And in it, I talk about how, despite writing for a very long time and even being published in multiple different mediums, it took me a very, very long time to call myself a writer, like as part of my identity. And so, I think my poet identity is very similar to this. Um, I haven't called myself a poet for many, many years, but I have been a poet for many, many years. I started writing poems when I was in junior high. Junior high was a very important era for me. Get it? Era. Um, that was when I was read my first letter from my birth mother. My parents read it to me. And to my confusion, after they had read it out loud to me, they left with it. They didn't give it to me. And so I started digging through the house because I thought that was my letter. It was supposed to be for me. I wanted to hold it in my hands. Um, and that's when I stumbled upon an entire manila folder titled Shannon that had all of my adoption documents, the decree, other letters I hadn't seen, pictures I hadn't seen, all kinds of other stuff. And everything kind of broke at that point. Um, Tony Corsentino always says, what does he say? He says, you can keep secrets that are about you, but you can't keep secrets about me. And, for me, it was a deep betrayal. And so I stole some of those documents and started writing poetry. Most of the poetry from this time period is gone, it's lost, and that is a good thing because there were definitely some strong Eminem vibes. Uh, Not a lot of people saw the poetry. It mostly stayed in my diary. Um, but I continued writing it, and there is some poetry that survives from later, especially after I had graduated high school and gone to Texas Tech. Um, I, boy, let me just sum up Texas Tech for you. So I went to Texas Tech for 2 years. I got kicked out both times, and I left with like a 1.3 GPA, which is really funny now, considering that I'm about to go get my PhD. But at the time, I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, my purpose in life, and all of that came out in the poetry that I was writing, the awful diary entries that are also mostly lost. Um, but yeah, that era did not end well. I attempted suicide during that time. I moved down to Austin for a little bit. I got pretty serious about my drug abuse. Experienced some homelessness where I lived in my car off and on, and finally I landed in rehab. So rehab is usually where I start my story when I meet new people, but I did have a life before then. For reasons that I now understand, having deconstructed so much of my adoption, rehab was an important moment for me because I thought, this is my chance. This is my chance to be the blank slate that I was supposed to be. And I really did try hard. And so, two things happened during rehab. I wrote Little Ballerina, which is not available anymore, nor should it be. It's awful. But 10 people out there in the world do have copies, and I think it's really rude that they will not get rid of it, even though I've asked them. The other thing is, I went through all of my diary stuff, so like 10 years of stuff, and I put it in this book, which again is pretty horrible, but I threw everything else out. To me, at that point in time, I thought my writing was part of the problem. So I thought, well, I'll put it all in one place and then put it up on the shelf. And so I didn't write for several years after that. And I lived in Plano at the time. I started my associate's degree, which I actually finished. That was a big deal at the time. And I got married, I got pregnant, had my daughter, and then I got divorced. So, um, as you can imagine, after I got divorced, the poetry was practically oozing out of me. I mean, just an explosion of writing because I had shut myself up for 4 years or a little bit more. And I realized how much I had needed my writing, especially the poetry. Um, but um, I think the divorce and adoption is very similar because they're family issues, right? And so it's very difficult to speak about them publicly without hurting somebody's feelings. So as I was writing all of this really, really intense divorce poetry, it wasn't quite Eminem, but it was pretty spicy. I created an alter ego. Her name was Andromeda Moon. And what's beautiful about Andromeda was that, unlike me, nobody knew who she was. So she could say any old thing that she wanted on the internet and everything. And so that was nice. She is still on Instagram, but all of her poems have been taken down and anthologized, but she's very cute. Feel free to creep. Um, but yeah, and ever since then, which I got divorced in 2017, so it's been several years, pretty much since then, I have continued to write poetry and keep it. I have not deleted much since then. And at the moment, I have 400 plus poems that are unorganized on my phone. I have had a couple, like three, published locally, but other than that, I a lot of my poetry has just always been under strict lock and key. That is, until now. Okay, so this is probably the juicy part that you've all been waiting for, like the composition journey of Mirrors Made of Ink. Let me tell you, it is very juicy, so buckle up. Um, Before I tell you why, I have to tell you about all of the other works in progress that I had going before Mirrors Made of Ink came about. So, way back in 2021, right after I had published Rose's Locket, I started a Google Doc called Shannon Q's Adoptee Diary. Um, I was so naive at the time because I thought that by writing and publishing Rose's Locket, that I had just solved all of my adoption trauma and I was good, right? No. What I had done was open up the floodgates. And so I started this adoptee diary and continued writing in it. Diary entries, blogs, op-eds, and poems. This thing is massive. I checked yesterday. It is currently 127,000 words right now. It's still ongoing. Um, for comparison, Rose's Locket, which is the published novel, is 73,000 words and utterly average as far as novel length. So, yeah. So that was going on. And then last year, last July, we're coming up on the anniversary of it. Last July, um, I got a call from my aunt, my biological aunt, and she let me know that my mother was in hospice. Now, way back in 2021, when I had just started the adoptee diary, I had found and gotten in contact with my aunt. She's magical. I adore her. Um, and so we've been talking on the phone and um, sending each other pictures and things like this. And my daughter and I even went to visit her in 2022, which was really nice. But her relationship to my mother was distant. You know, she was the power of attorney and just kind of helped Carol, my mother, move around and everything. And she was living in nursing homes, several, because um hold on, I lost myself in my notes. Okay. So about my mother, she has lived a very, very rough life. Um, she has struggled with intellectual disability, mental health problems, severe drug abuse, beyond any drug abuse I have ever grappled with, homelessness, prostitution, and there is a full criminal record that is public that I have found and documented. Um, so even though I had met my aunt was very clear about, you know, if you do reach out to her, there need to be very clear boundaries. You can write her a letter, but don't give her a mailing address, give her a P.O. box. You can call her, but I would give her like a Google Voice phone number kind of thing. So I had tried to reach out before. I wrote her a couple letters. Um, my aunt had given her my Google Voice phone number and she had left a voicemail, but then never answered when I called back, kind of thing. Okay, so back to last July 1st, my aunt calls me and is like, hey, your mom is in hospice. I know you had never really planned on visiting her, but now's the time, you know, if you're going to do it, now's the time. Um, of course, I immediately changed my mind. I didn't think that I would, but it was very immediate, and I did. So, I planned to go meet her. I visited her for a full week last July, and I asked my daughter if she wanted to come too. This was controversial among my adoptive family, but Carol was my mother and therefore my daughter's grandmother. So I wanted the choice to be in her hands. She said that she wasn't ready, so that solidified that I was going to write a very detailed reunion account. And I did. Of the week that I visited her last July, all of the phone calls in between, another visit last September, and then some more phone calls, voicemails. That is a 10,000 word document. And it's grown since then. Um, Mostly it's a letter. It's a letter to my daughter to give her the context of where she comes from, where I come from. Um, it's a very, what do you say? It's an intimate version of my life story. It's not publication bound, but it's all I have to give, you know? So that's going on. In November, when my mother passed away, um, you know, as you do, I kind of lost it. I quit my job. I was really upset. And it just the whole thing was upsetting because I knew it was coming. And also because there was a lot of both and in our reunion. I was thrilled to be in the same room with her, but she was also very frustrating. It was like looking in a mirror in some of the worst ways. Um, so yeah, basically, I am a person that loves to organize. Obviously, writing is one of my coping mechanisms, you know? So I started pouring through everything that I had written about Carol, just trying to come to terms with the fact that our reunion had been so short, you know? And yeah. So I turned to poetry. I was writing poetry, but because Shannon Q's adoptee diary already existed, I scrolled through and pulled out all of the poems. I was curious, like, how many poems are hidden in here? You know, it's a massive collection. And there was 60. There was a lot. Um, so that's kind of where it started of just I pulled all of the poems out and started organizing them and thinking about how how odd it is the passage of time because time is really all we have. And I think in the adoption constellation, we know especially well how bluntly it can take from us. Um, so that was kind of my focus because I felt cheated. I felt very cheated. Um, I organized the story, I guess you can call it a story, the narrative arc of the poems in a way that hopefully, like, as readers are going through, it feels like you're peeking into a lifelong diary. Because that's truly what this is. Although the detailed reunion account is turning into kind of that like lifelong context for my daughter, I have not yet told my full story end to end. And I don't think I'm capable of it yet. But this poetry book is as close as I could manage at this time. Also, I feel like I have to sneeze. Okay, I think it's past. But funny note about sneezing. Sometimes people ask me about what it is like when I write poetry, and I always tell them it's like a sneeze because it just happens. I don't know. And I clean it up afterwards, you know? Just like me carefully adjusting the snot on the Kleenex. That's probably a horrible metaphor. Anyway, so the weird thing is also about this whole thing was that I had 4 months with Carol. July, August, October. And then after she passed, 4 months later is when I published Mirrors Made of Ink. Um, I self-published this book. Um, I didn't, I felt very strongly about the self-publishing. For one, I needed the organizational time to heal. That's how I heal. Um, is, here's this quote from me that's in the back of the book. I heal in piles of papers that need organizing. That's true. That's why I scrapbook. That's why I make these silly little binders. This is my Mirrors Made of Ink binder. It has all of the poems in here. That way I could like move them around and things. But I don't know. It's funny. It's funny the mathematics of it that I had 4 months with her and then I needed 4 months to heal. Um, but I also felt strongly that unlike Rose's Locket, which is a fictional book, Mirrors Made of Ink is mine. And I did not want an editor's hands on these poems. These poems are in many ways more vulnerable than even a diary entry could be, you know. And so I I didn't want to go through like a publishing house the way I had for Rosa's Locket. And so I feel like much like Taylor Swift's reclamation of her songs that are now in parentheses Taylor's version, this poetry collection will always be mine and only mine. This is Shannon's version. So I think that's pretty much all of that. It's devastating. Okay. Now we're going to do some poetry readings. But first, I want to share a little bit with you about the poems that I chose here. So I'm going to read 4 of them to you. But as many of you are aware, I spent my master's degree studying adoptee written Ghost Kingdom narratives. So for anyone new to the conversation, a ghost kingdom is basically a psychic reality for people in the adoption constellation where they can daydream about missing people in their lives. So, for example, an adoptee might daydream about who her biological mother might be, you know, and this was coined by Betty Jean Lifton in 1994. And to be honest, I really think ghost kingdoms and the discussion of them is so fascinating because they illuminate the ways in which our minds, in the wake of missing information, will create fictions. And those fictions are coping mechanisms. I'm probably going to get that tattooed on my body at some point. Just fiction is a coping mechanism. Anyway, so all 4 of these poems that I'm about to read to you, they relate to the ghost kingdom in some way. And I'm not gonna like bore you on how, but we can talk about it in the Q&A section. Okay, so let me see. The first one is Mom Space. Let me find it. Okay. So this one I would say is kind of like about seeing a ghost kingdom from the outside. Okay. Mom Space. I would catch her at it during dinner, fork poised over her plate with some forgotten bite. A gaze that was rapt yet absent, lips barely parted. It was the first time I recognized thought from the outside inward. Mom? I'd ask, drawing her back from somewhere. Oh, she'd snap to, then smile sheepishly. Just Mom's face again. But what did she see there? I'll never know. Though every once in a while, when I was older, I recognized something deeply sad about her gaze out the window. Mom's space wasn't somewhere I wanted to be. Okay. The next one is called Belly Button, and it's one of my like top 5 favorite poems in this book. Why are there so many poems in this book, dude? So here it is. Okay. So I think this one is pretty self-explanatory, but for me, Belly Button is really about just a confession of the act of filling the emptiness inside, you know? So, Belly Button. Contemplating my navel, but it's apples to oranges, your existence and mine. Thinking about reality, but it's fiction and fantasy, the parts that built me. How can absence define so much? So I fill it with fluff and stuff. Don't you? All right. This next one, Betty Jean at the bar, was literally written for you, for this community. It is probably the nerdiest thing I have ever composed, and it is a poem that comes with citations. So I will tell you who all of the characters are after I read it to you, but they are all listed in the citations at the bottom of the page. These are right. So there's kind of some prereq reading. Sorry, but I'll explain it, I promise. Betty Jean at the bar. A mythology professor, a psychiatrist, a naturalist, and a poet walk into a bar. They chat about heroes and their journeys, the imaginary royal families children daydream about when they wish to escape the families they find themselves in, the mysteries, both in our heads and at the bottom of the globe, and the hauntings we endure. The bartender, Betty Jean, pours all of them into one large bottle and calls the concoction the Ghost Kingdom. The adoptees say it's a magic potion because when you drink it, you are embarking on a mythical quest to discover the true nature of reality, humanity, and your own elusive self. The potion gives you the courage to gaze into the emptiness, past, and future. The bar is not real, but that doesn't make the trip, the drink, or the trip any less true. So, to sum up, the mythology professor is Joseph Campbell. He's responsible for the hero's journey. The psychiatrist is Freud. We still can't escape him. The naturalist is Lauren Isley, who Betty Jean Lifton quotes in her book where she coins the Ghost Kingdom. And the poet is Isaac Bashevis Singer, who wrote about hauntings. And I'm still looking this up. I didn't find it in my original research, but he wrote supposedly about ghost shtetls, ghost towns. So yeah, this is basically the poem that like came out of my head as I was writing the first chapter of my thesis, which you can read on my website. This last poem is super devastating. And for me, a part of my actual ghost kingdom, for me, my ghost kingdoms are almost exclusively in my dreams. Okay. Paper birds. When you took your last breath, I was dreaming. Paper birds flew about our heads, stuffed with the secrets of our lives. Burn them, we cackled. And with our fingertips, we set them aflame. I stood among the charred remains. Your nurse on the other side of the phone. When you took your last breath, was I dreaming? No. There are some other poetry reading recordings on Instagram as well. But yeah, those are my four favorite because of how they interact with the Ghost Kingdom stuff. And I think, I mean, besides my research that I did in my master's thesis, the Ghost Kingdom is very interesting to me because for a long time, it's all I had, right? I think that's fairly obvious. But even when I met my mother, ghost kingdoms were still in play, hers and mine. It was very clear that what we wanted from each other, neither of us were able to give each other. And so it was uncomfortable for both of us. And ghost kingdoms are a coping mechanism. And they were definitely being employed by both parties, you know? So, yeah, I think, hold on, I'm checking my notes because I wrote down a bunch of stuff to make sure I wouldn't forget to tell you anything. I think I've covered most of it. This is a plea for reviews. Reviews help potential readers decide. The more reviews, the better visibility of a book. I will mail you a free bookmark. Please. Okay, for real though, I have these really cute bookmarks, not only from Mirrors Made of Ink, which I'll show you right now. This is the bookmark. It's a little ghost with a ghost kingdom. And I'll show you the back in a second. But I also have stickers and stuff from Rose's Locket that you could ask me for, and bookmarks from Rose's Locket. There's 4 different kinds, and like together they all make a map. They have little quotes on the back. So cute. Could be yours for free. I'm just saying, all you got to do, post your review, send me your mailing address, and I will happily give you whatever you ask for. But there's another way to earn cool bookmarks. Are you ready? Okay, that's the bookmark. This is how you become a certified Ghost Kingdom hunter. Okay, so this is in the back of the book, like literally the very, very back. Okay, if you didn't get that far, it's okay. You can peek ahead. So basically, the Ghost Kingdom Hunter game is just where you find ghost kingdoms in the wild and report them to me. They're everywhere. But the problem is, we don't call them ghost kingdoms. Not often. Brian Stanton's movie is an exception because he called it At Ghost Kingdom. So finding his narrative was simple, but not so with others. Fun fact, I had not known about ghost kingdoms when I was writing Rose's Locket. And guess what Izzy's little fantasy world is? Correct. It's a ghost kingdom. So all you have to do is send me an example of a ghost kingdom and I will mail you a free bookmark. Now, I do want to say, make it very clear, a ghost kingdom is a fantasy created by a person in the adoption constellation relating to something about their familial situation, right? Usually some kind of gap or missing information or like a counterfactual, like what if my mom had a motorcycle and she's coming to get me tomorrow? That kind of stuff. Fantasies that people create, people who are outside of the adoption constellation, those are not ghost kingdoms. Ghost kingdoms was created specifically for the adoption community. So I just want to make that clear. All right. So please send me them. I'm collecting them. And what I think I will start doing is once I start getting some submissions, I want to create like a Ghost Kingdom library. I'll just put it on my website and then we can just kind of start collecting them, right? So that we can, have a collection of them and see all of this because the psychological process of creating these fantasies in scenarios of trauma, I think really, really deeply highlights how complex adoption stories are. They're so complex that we are literally creating other stories, other lives, other possibilities in our heads to cope with it. I think that's important. So help me collect. That's pretty much all I have. I really appreciate you listening to me. Um, this little PS here is I just got this finalized like yesterday, but I am doing an in-person book signing and another poetry reading um at Lucky Dogs Books in Dallas, August 31st. So if you're in town, please come hang out. Otherwise, please follow me on Instagram. You can go see my website. It's like mostly up to date. And yeah, we can start the Q&A. I want to hear from you.